Today, we're conducting a strategic analysis of Operation Cartagena. This was supposed to be a decisive naval action in March 1939, right at the end of the Spanish Civil War. But instead of a victory, it turned into a textbook example of operational failure. We're going to break down exactly what went wrong.
Right. Before we dive in, a quick note. This entire analysis is based on the incredibly detailed work done by the Batalha Civil Project. If you want to go deeper into the source material, that website is the place to go.
Okay, so here's our agenda. We'll start with the initial strategic plan. Then we'll look at how things kicked off in a race against time. Next, we'll see how the door slammed shut on the main objective in Cartagena. After that, the desperate pivot to an alternative plan. And finally, we'll do the post-mortem, an analysis of why it all failed.
All right, Section 1, the strategic plan. To understand this operation, you've got to know the context. The Catalonia campaign had just wrapped up successfully, so the Nationalist High Command was gearing up for the final push. And a huge part of that final offensive was going to be naval power.
So, the plan was to launch a series of amphibious landings. Forces were staged in two key areas, Castellón and Málaga. The targets were Valencia and Aguilas, but the real prize, the primary objective, was Cartagena. Why? Because it was the main Republican naval base, and intelligence was suggesting an uprising was about to kick off there.
And they weren't messing around. They had some serious naval assets positioned and ready to go. You had the cruiser Canarias and destroyers in Cadiz, auxiliary cruisers and submarines in Mallorca, fast launches in Ibiza, not to mention all the transport steamers in Castellón and Málaga. Looking at this order of battle, it's clear they were poised to launch a complex amphibious assault at a moment's notice.
Okay, Section 2. Now we get to the race against time. The date is March 5th, 1939. Word comes in about the uprising in Cartagena, and that single piece of news sets off an immediate, high-stakes race against the clock. A race, as we'll see, they were destined to lose. And when I say fast, I mean fast. Just look at the timeline here. First report comes in at 0654. By 10:55, they're ordering aerial recon. Less than 15 minutes later, the order goes out to all ships. Raise steam. By 1300, Vice Admiral Marino is already at sea with his cruisers. And an hour after that, the submarines are heading out. The entire operation was defined by one thing from the very beginning: speed.
So here's what that flurry of orders looked like on the map. You can see Moreno's group steaming out of Palma. Meanwhile, submarines are being sent ahead to check out possible landing sites around Cartagena. The initial plan is officially underway.
But then, a really critical decision gets made. The 83rd Division gets the call to mobilize. And based on these, let's say, very optimistic reports coming from the ground, the plan changes. They scrap the idea of landing at Cabo de Palos. The new order? Sail right into Cartagena's main harbor and land there. A much, much riskier move.
And we're not talking about a small raiding party here. The force they committed was 13,000 men. That's the entire 83rd Division, plus their artillery, their supplies, all of it, being rushed onto ships at Castellón.
This just shows you how desperate they were for speed. Everything was rushed. General Martin Alonso, the division commander, wanted to form up a proper protected convoy, but his request was denied. The order was to send each transport ship out the second it was loaded. They were prioritizing speed over security.
Let's be clear about the level of risk they were accepting here. These transports were sailing straight into hostile waters. The Republican fleet could show up, enemy planes could attack from nearby airfields, there could be submarines lurking. But none of that mattered. The one and only directive was get there on time.
Okay, Section 3. So, while this massive relief force is steaming south, what's actually happening on the ground in Cartagena? Well, the situation for the rebels is falling apart. Fast. The door is closing.
That night, the night of March 5th into the 6th, was absolutely critical. Loyalist forces launched effective counterattacks, and the rebels started losing their grip on key positions, especially the powerful coastal batteries that controlled the entrance to the harbor. You can see where this is going. That window of opportunity was slamming shut.
And yet, this is the kind of intel that High Command was getting. This message came from the rebel commander, General Barrio-Nuevo. The fleet can enter at once. All coastal batteries have joined the movement. This single, fatally optimistic message was the entire reason they decided to sail directly into the port. It sounded too good to be true, and it was accepted without question.
So, the moment of truth comes at 7:30 in the morning on March 6th. The lead ship, the Mar Cantábrico, makes its approach to the harbor, It even radios in asking for a pilot, and its response? It gets fired on. Fired on by the exact same coastal batteries that were supposed to be friendly. In that one moment, it was over. The plan had completely failed, a direct landing was absolutely impossible.
All right, Section 4. The main plan has just spectacularly blown up. So what do? The commanders on the scene are now under incredible pressure to come up with a Plan B, a last-ditch effort.
So think about the problem facing Vice Admiral Moreno and General Martin Alonso. Cartagena is now a no-go zone, but they have 13,000 troops floating in vulnerable transports at sea, and the rebels they came to save are being wiped out. Is there any other option? What do you do?
Well, they scrambled and came up with a new plan. The idea was to shift the landing to the nearby Bay of Portman. They land a light, fast-moving force, have them seize the high ground overlooking Cartagena, and hopefully create an opening for the main force to get in.
But even as they drew up this new plan, the commanders on the scene knew it was a long shot. Look at this radio message Moreno sent back to Franco's headquarters that night. He's brutally honest. Difficulties are enormous, great losses estimated, and low probability of success. That's not a commander who's confident in his plan. It's a desperate gamble, and he knows it.
Franco's HQ actually approved the plan after midnight. But by then, it was just too late. At dawn on March 7th, as they were getting ready to go, the coastal batteries near Portman opened fire on them. And then came the final nail in the coffin. News arrived that the uprising in Cartagena had completely collapsed. There was nothing left to save. The operation was called off. The order was given to withdraw.
And that brings us to our final section, the post-operation debrief. Let's do a systematic breakdown of exactly why this mission failed so completely. When you really analyze it, the failure boils down to 4 critical interconnected factors. First, the intelligence was just plain wrong. Second, they had terrible situational awareness. Third, their communications were too slow and inflexible. And fourth, all of this led to fatal delays in their decision-making.
So let's break that down. Number 1, flawed intelligence. The reports about the rebels controlling the coastal batteries were just not accurate. Number 2, lack of real-time awareness. The fleet was basically sailing blind, with no idea how bad things were getting on the ground. 3, inflexible communications. The network got bogged down with encrypted messages, which created critical delays. And finally, all that lost time was fatal. By the time they even got approval for the Portman landing, the opportunity was long gone. Simply put, the enemy was making decisions faster than they were.
So what were the strategic consequences of this failure? Well, they were immediate. The plan to take the naval base by force was a bust. So the Nationalists had to shift their entire naval strategy. On March 8th, just a day later, they declared a full naval blockade of what was left of the Republican coast, sealing it off from the sea for the rest of the war. And that concludes our analysis. Ultimately, the failure at Cartagena is a powerful lesson. It underscores just how critical accurate intelligence, adaptive leadership, and fast, responsive communications really are in any joint operation. For a much deeper dive, we once again direct you to the source material at batallasguerracivil.es.